In 2018, a quiet mountain town in North Carolina was shaken by a disappearance that would uncover years of hidden corruption. Claire Donovan, a young nurse with a secret, vanished after exposing something inside Clearwater Medical Center. What began as a missing person case soon spiraled into a trail of deceit, death, and buried truth, stretching far beyond the hospital walls. 7 years later, new evidence emerges, and one detective discovers that some secrets don't stay buried forever, because in Clearwater, even the water remembers. On the night of October 12, 2017, Claire Donovan, a 27-year-old nurse from Bend, Oregon, clocked out of St. Charles Medical Center just after 10:34 p.m. It was a Thursday, nothing unusual. She had texted her roommate, late shift done, finally heading home, followed by a small heart emoji. That was the last confirmed contact anyone ever had with her. Claire's drive home should have taken no more than 25 minutes. A straight shot west along Highway 26, a stretch of road familiar to every local, dark, pine-lined and empty after 10. When she didn't arrive home by midnight, her roommate, Sophie Lang, assumed she'd stopped for gas or food. It wasn't until 2 a.m., when Claire's phone went straight to voicemail, that worry turned into dread. By morning, Sophie reported her missing. The Bend Police Department initially treated it as a delayed return, a common label for adults under 30. But when officers checked traffic cams, they discovered something strange. Claire's blue Subaru Outback was captured passing a highway camera near Sisters Junction at 10:58 p.m., but it never appeared on the next camera 12 miles west. Somewhere in that 12-mile void, Claire Donovan had vanished. Detective Ryan Mercer, a 20-year veteran with Deschutes County Sheriff's Office, led the initial search. He knew the area intimately, logging roads, hunting trails, and desolate turnouts where you could pull off unseen. Within 48 hours, a full-scale search began involving drones, K9 units, and volunteers combing both sides of Highway 26 on October 14th. Claire's Subaru was discovered abandoned on a gravel turnout known locally as Deer Run Vista, a remote overlook used mostly by hikers and truckers. The car was locked, keys missing, driver's seat pushed slightly back. Her phone was gone, but her nurse badge and insulated lunch tote were found on the passenger seat. The most unsettling detail was the position of the car. It faced east, the opposite direction of home. A forensics team processed the scene. There were no fingerprints other than Claire's, no tire tracks leading away, and no signs of struggle. But cadaver dogs reacted strongly near the tree line behind the overlook, circling repeatedly before losing the scent about 50 yards in. Investigators later learned that a light rain had passed through the area that night, likely washing away crucial trace evidence. The early investigation produced few leads. Detectives interviewed co-workers, friends, and family. Everyone described Claire as responsible, compassionate, and not the kind of person to vanish voluntarily. She had recently been promoted to assistant charge nurse and was planning a trip to visit her parents in Washington. Nothing in her life suggested instability or escape. Then came the tip that changed everything. On October 16th, a truck driver named Hank Olson called police claiming he'd seen a car with hazards on near Deer Run Vista the night Claire disappeared. According to his statement, he'd passed the turnout around 11:10 p.m. and noticed a woman standing near the Subaru's open trunk, talking to someone inside a dark pickup truck parked behind her. Looked like she knew him, Olson recalled. Didn't seem like trouble, just odd that late at night. Unfortunately, the driver couldn't provide a plate number or a clear description of the man. His dashcam footage had already overwritten itself by the time detectives reached him. Still, the tip gave investigators their first concrete lead, a dark pickup and a possible interaction just minutes after Claire's last known sighting. The story spread fast. By late October, Claire Donovan's face was everywhere. News broadcasts, missing person flyers, Reddit threads dissecting her final movements. Reporters flocked to Bend, calling it the Highway 26 mystery. Community searches turned emotional as hundreds volunteered, But hope began to wane when each new lead ended in nothing. Then, a discovery added a darker undertone. On November 3rd, a hiker found a torn piece of fabric deep in the forest about 2 miles from the turnout. It was light blue, matching the scrubs Claire had been wearing that night. DNA analysis confirmed it was hers, but beyond that, nothing else. No phone, no shoes, no remains. For Detective Mercer, the evidence painted an impossible picture. Either she left that car willingly and met someone she trusted, he later said, or someone made her feel safe enough to stop. That theory would only grow stronger as new digital evidence surfaced. Data that hinted Claire's disappearance wasn't random at all. Detective Ryan Mercer sat in his office on a cold October morning, coffee going stale in his cup, eyes locked on a wall of case photos, maps, screenshots, a printed timeline, and a smiling portrait of Claire Donovan, her hospital ID clipped to her scrubs. 3 weeks had passed since she vanished, and every lead had evaporated into the Oregon wilderness. Then, the digital forensics team from Salem sent over a partial data report from Claire's cell provider. The phone had gone dark around 11:12 p.m., but the GPS data before shutdown told a subtle story, one that would rewrite the timeline investigators thought they understood. Her phone had last pinged a cell tower 1.8 miles west of Deer Run Vista, not at the turnout itself. Even stranger, there was a brief data spike, a burst of online activity, just before the phone signal disappeared. The record showed that someone had opened a rideshare app, then typed a message that was never sent. The unsent draft read, "Something's off. I think someone's follow." The message ended mid-sentence. Mercer's stomach tightened as he read it. It wasn't definitive proof of foul play, but it was the first time Claire's own actions had hinted at fear. Working backward, Mercer ordered a full dump of Claire's digital footprint, social media, cloud storage, email, and rideshare accounts. What emerged over the next week was a mosaic of ordinary life, shadowed by something that didn't fit. Between late September and early October, Claire had received 3 anonymous text messages from a prepaid number. The first said, "You drive home late. Be careful out there." The second, "You looked tired last night." The third, sent 2 days before she disappeared, read simply, "We should talk again." None of the numbers were active by the time police traced them. When investigators subpoenaed Claire's phone records, they noticed another anomaly. She had received 6 calls from a blocked number over the 2 weeks before her disappearance, always between 9:45 and 10:15 p.m., her usual shift end time. She never answered them. Sophie Lang, Claire's roommate, told detectives that Claire had mentioned feeling weirded out by someone who'd been showing up at the hospital coffee kiosk during her night shifts. She said he was polite but intense, Sophie recalled. He'd always ask how long until she got off work or if she needed a walk to her car. The hospital's security office provided surveillance footage. Mercer and his team spent hours reviewing grainy black and white clips until, finally, they saw him. A tall man in a grey hoodie, medium build, early 30s, always hanging near the coffee counter between 9:30 and 10 p.m. on October 12th, the night Claire vanished. He was there again. He waited until she clocked out. Then he followed her out of frame. Detectives ran facial recognition on the footage. No hits. They cross-referenced the timestamp with parking lot cameras, discovering a dark Ford F-150 exiting just 2 minutes after Claire's Subaru pulled out. The truck's license plate was unreadable, but its front bumper bore a distinctive dent, visible under the flickering lights of the hospital lot. That same dented F-150 would later appear in 2 other surveillance clips, once on a traffic cam near Sisters Junction and again on a gas station camera 20 minutes later, heading west, same route as Claire. For Mercer, it was the first thread that connected every fragment: the man at the hospital, the truck on Highway 26, and the unknown figure seen by the truck driver that night. But without a license plate or name, it was a ghost lead. Meanwhile, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit joined the case, reviewing the evidence through a criminal profiling lens. Their assessment was chillingly precise. The perpetrator demonstrates pre-offense surveillance and familiarity with the victim's schedule. He exhibits controlled behavior, suggesting prior criminal planning or stalking tendencies. Likely a male between 28-40, working in or around medical facilities, possibly with prior contact with the victim. That description fit half of Ben's night shift population, but one clue stood out. A security officer at the hospital remembered that around early October, a maintenance subcontractor had been working overnight shifts in the same wing as Claire's unit. The company, Cascade Facilities Management, confirmed that one employee matched the vague description: Ethan Rowe, age 34, former HVAC technician, hired for temporary repair work. Rowe's file listed no criminal record, but Mercer's instincts screamed that something was off. When officers went to question him, they found his rental trailer empty. Clothes gone, phone disconnected, no forwarding address. His last recorded paycheck was dated October 11th, the day before Claire disappeared. The discovery sent the investigation into overdrive. Flyers with Rowe's photo flooded Oregon rest stops and truck depots. Yet weeks turned into months with no trace of him. By January 2018, the case officially transitioned from active search to cold status. But Mercer refused to close the file. He continued to revisit the evidence every few months, reanalyzing digital data with newer software, tracking rumors, chasing false sightings. It wasn't until late 2020, 3 years after Claire vanished, that a random tech update reignited the case. A cloud backup sync, triggered by new machine learning forensic software, uncovered a deleted photo, fragment from Claire's phone, time-stamped, just minutes before her final message draft. The fragment showed a blurred reflection in her car's side mirror, a pair of headlights, following closely behind, the vehicle's shape, a dark pickup truck. Winter had turned the Oregon woods into a white silence when Detective Ryan Mercer reopened the Donovan file for the 100th time. Snow whispered against the glass, and the photo of Claire, bright smile, ocean blue scrubs, stared back at him from the case wall. It had been over 3 years, but her story wouldn't let him go. The name Ethan Rowe sat circled in red ink. No one had seen him since the week Claire vanished. No family contact. No credit activity, no social media presence. It was as if the man had dissolved into the forest, but Mercer knew ghosts left traces. Tiny digital footprints buried beneath time, and sometimes all it took was one update, one overlooked clue to bring a case back to life. When the 2020 forensic software flagged the mirror photo from Claire's cloud backup, Mercer stared at it for hours. The image was half-corrupted, grainy, but the headlights trailing behind her weren't just any lights. They formed a distinctive triangular pattern. That same configuration was unique to a 2004-2006 Ford F-150 model, the exact range seen in the earlier surveillance footage. He had his truck. Now he needed its owner. The FBI's Vehicle Analysis Unit cross-referenced that truck type with DMV records and employment rosters from Cascade Facilities. Out of 12 registered F-150s owned by employees at the time, only one had a front bumper dent reported in an internal incident file. The vehicle belonged to Ethan Rowe. That single match reignited a 3-year dormant manhunt. Agents traced Rowe's last verified location, a rented trailer in Madras, Oregon, near the highway junction leading north. But when they arrived, the property was long abandoned. The landowner said Rowe had left in a hurry, owing 2 months' rent. Inside, investigators found the remains of a life hastily erased. Unopened mail, a burned phone, and a spiral notebook with missing pages. The few pages left contained numbers, scribbles, and one chilling note scrawled in the margin. "She saw me." Mercer's gut told him Rowe hadn't vanished out of fear. He'd disappeared because he knew the investigation was closing in. The Bureau dug deeper. They discovered Rowe had once been treated at Cascadia Regional Hospital, the same one where Claire worked. Records showed he'd been admitted in 2016 for a minor workplace injury. His attending nurse, Claire Donovan, hospital logs confirmed she'd signed his discharge papers. That was the first connection. It wasn't random. He knew her. Further interviews painted a clearer picture of Rowe, quiet, polite, but socially detached. He'd bounced between short-term maintenance jobs, often quitting abruptly. A former co-worker described him as the kind of guy who noticed everything but said nothing. When shown Claire's photo, the co-worker hesitated before whispering, "Yeah, he used to keep that picture on his locker," said she was kind to him. The pattern was no longer coincidence, it was obsession. By spring 2021, the task force traced a new lead through Rowe's financials. While his personal bank account had gone dormant, a vehicle registration renewal appeared in Washington state, under a slightly altered name, Ethan Rowe. The address led to a small rural town outside Spokane. The team moved fast. Local deputies raided the listed property, an old mechanic's workshop at the edge of the forest. The building was mostly empty, save for a few rusted tools, oil cans, and a mattress in the corner. But behind a false wall, they found something that made every investigator in the room go silent. Pinned to a corkboard were printed photos of Claire, hospital corridors, her car, and snapshots of her walking through the staff parking lot, taken from a distance, as if someone had followed her for weeks. Below the board sat a cardboard box labelled in black marker, October 12th. Inside it were a hospital ID lanyard, not Claire's, a cracked phone case matching Claire's model, a single earring, silver with a blue stone, and a USB drive wrapped in cloth. The USB contained 7 video files. The first 6 were blank, just static. The 7th, time-stamped October 11th, 2017, 10:49 p.m., showed a dark road illuminated by headlights. Claire's voice could be faintly heard, humming to a song from her car radio. Then, another voice, a male one, muttered faintly off camera, "You shouldn't drive alone this late." The footage cut out. That clip was enough for the FBI to issue a federal warrant for Ethan Rowe's arrest on charges of stalking, kidnapping, and homicide. But Rowe was still missing. In 2022, hikers near Mount Jefferson stumbled upon an abandoned pickup truck submerged halfway in a creek, partially hidden by moss and pine needles. The VIN confirmed it was Rowe's F-150. Inside were a rusted wrench, 2 wallets, both soaked and unreadable, and a faded note tucked in the sun visor. Written in jagged handwriting were 4 words, "She's where I am." The surrounding area was searched for weeks. Cadaver dogs picked up a faint scent trail that led to a rocky ridge, but heavy snowfall halted the excavation. To this day, Claire Donovan's body has never been found. Her case remains one of Oregon's most haunting unsolved cold cases, revived every few years by new technology, new theories, and strangers who refuse to forget her name. And on Mercer's desk, even now, the photo remains, the same one pinned beside Rowe's. 2 lives forever entangled by a night that still whispers through the pines. The detective still visits Deer Run Vista every October 12th. He stands by the turnout, looks at the valley below, and listens to the wind that seems to carry her voice. Something's off. "I think someone's follow..." The message that never finished still lingers, both in her phone and in his mind. By the time the case reached 2024, Detective Mercer had learned that obsession could look a lot like faith. Faith that maybe somehow a trace of Claire still existed beyond that night. Faith that the right clue might still be waiting in a drawer, a data archive, or buried in snow. But what Mercer didn't expect was that the next break wouldn't come from his team. It would come from a podcast. In February, a true crime podcast called Echoes of the Lost aired an episode titled The Night Nurse of Bend. It revisited the Claire Donovan disappearance, bringing old witnesses back into public attention. Within a week, The podcast's tip line received over 200 messages, most useless, some cruel. But one voicemail stood out. It came from a woman named Laura Pierce, who claimed she'd once worked as a travel nurse at Cascadia Regional Hospital around the same time as Claire. Her voice trembled as she spoke. I never told anyone, but a few days before she vanished, Claire came into the locker room. She looked scared, said some guy was showing up in places he shouldn't, staff parking lot, cafeteria, even outside her apartment. I told her to tell security. She said she did, but no one ever followed up. When Mercer interviewed Laura in person, she provided something no one else ever had, a name. She called him Ethan, said he worked maintenance nights. That one word, Ethan, was enough to bring the FBI's attention roaring back. Digging through the hospital's old security logs, Mercer discovered something that chilled him. For 5 nights before Claire's disappearance, the same employee badge had been scanned into restricted hospital areas after hours. Storage rooms, stairwells, and, on the final night, the West Staff parking exit, where Claire's car was last seen. The badge belonged to E. Rowe, but here was the twist. The timestamps showed the card had been used after Rowe's shift ended, meaning someone either lent or stole the badge or someone else had access. Mercer double-checked the system. The logs were still on paper, a messy sign-in sheet scanned into a database years later. He noticed something small but crucial, 2 different signatures under Rowe's name, one neat and square, one slanted, rushed, 2 handwritings. The revelation reopened the theory that maybe Rowe hadn't acted alone. Investigators revisited his old co-workers, and one name reappeared multiple times, Victor Holden, a night security guard who'd worked briefly at the hospital before quitting abruptly in 2018. The same month Rowe's rental trailer was found abandoned. Victor had a clean record, no violent history, and after leaving Bend, he'd moved across state lines to Sandpoint, Idaho, where he worked at a boat repair yard under a new alias. When Mercer and 2 agents visited him, Victor was calm, cooperative, too calm. They noticed his right hand trembled slightly, a tremor from an old injury, he said. When they showed him Claire's photo, he didn't flinch. That's the nurse who went missing, right? Sad story. Never met her, but Mercer could tell from his eyes. He had. The agents obtained a search warrant for Victor's property 2 days later. In the back of a shed near the lake, they found a pile of discarded belongings, life jackets, tools, and, underneath, a waterproof case. Inside was a camera memory card, wrapped in foil. When forensics recovered the data, they found dozens of landscape photos, boats, sunsets, docks, but buried deep in a corrupted folder was one image that made every agent in the room fall silent. It showed Claire Donovan, her car door open, headlights on, turning her head toward the camera. She wasn't smiling. She looked startled. The metadata confirmed it was taken minutes before her phone's last location pinged. The photo reignited the case across national media. News outlets called it the first new evidence in the Donovan disappearance in 7 years. But the discovery also brought more questions than answers. If Victor had the camera, where was Ethan Rowe? Did Victor take the photo, or did Ethan hand him the camera before he vanished? And who wrote the note? She's where I am. In April, a dive team returned to the creek near Mount Jefferson where Rowe's truck was found. The melted snow had exposed part of the forest floor that had been unreachable before. Beneath a tangle of roots, the team found fragments of a second vehicle door, heavily corroded. Forensics later matched the paint and metal fragments to Claire's blue Toyota Corolla. She'd made it that far. But the discovery also revealed something else. Tire marks from 2 different vehicles. Rowe's truck and another smaller, older model, similar to a security patrol car, which meant someone else followed her. Someone who likely helped move the truck and cover the scene after she vanished. By June 2024, investigators gathered enough to confront Victor Holden again. This time, he didn't act calm. He refused to answer questions and asked for a lawyer. but his silence said everything Mercer needed to know. Before leaving the interrogation room, Mercer laid one photo on the table, the image of Claire turning her head toward the lens. "You took this," he said quietly, "and you were there when she disappeared." Victor didn't look up, but his jaw tightened. "If I tell you where she is," he whispered, "it won't bring her back." 2 days later, Victor was found dead in his apartment, an apparent suicide. Beside him was a single envelope addressed to Detective Mercer. Inside was a torn piece of paper that read, "You've been looking in the wrong place. The water hides more than one story." And scribbled below that, the initials ER. The next morning, Mercer stood at the edge of Clearwater Lake, a few miles from Sand Point. The mist rolled over the surface like smoke, the water eerily still. Somewhere beneath, maybe, was the truth he'd been chasing for 7 years. A missing nurse, a stalker who vanished, a guard who knew too much, and a story that refused to stay buried. The morning Clearwater Lake was drained. The air felt heavier than it should have. Mist hung low, curling around the trees like fingers unwilling to let go of their secrets. Detective Ryan Mercer stood on the shoreline, watching the last of the water pumps whine and churn, pulling gallons of black water into temporary reservoirs. For years, the lake had been quiet, a vacation spot where families fished and couples rented rowboats in summer. No one imagined that beneath its calm surface lay a 7-year-old mystery. Now, with Victor Holden dead and his cryptic message still echoing in Mercer's mind. The water hides more than one story. This place felt like the last door left to open. By noon, divers in black suits waded into the dark silt at the bottom. Visibility was nearly zero. The mud was thick and cold, swallowing their boots as they searched through the soft floor. At 1:47 p.m., a diver's muffled voice crackled through the radio. "Detective, we've got something." Mercer leaned forward, heart pounding. A few minutes later, the team surfaced, dragging what looked like a large plastic storage container, its corners corroded, its lids sealed with industrial tape. The container was hauled onto the bank, mud dripping down its sides. Forensics experts moved in carefully, slicing the tape, lifting the lid, and the stench of decay hit like a wall. Inside were 2 distinct sets of remains. The first, skeletal, partially intact, clothing scraps still clinging to bone, women's jeans, fragments of a nurse's uniform, a small silver earring with a blue stone. The second, male remains, taller, broader shoulders, still wearing a work badge with faded letters visible under grime. It read, E. Rowe. Mercer stared at the bodies, frozen. Claire Donovan and Ethan Rowe, together, in the same container. It didn't make sense. If Rowe had abducted her, how did they both end up dead in the same lake? Who sealed them there, and why? The coroner's report a week later made things worse. Claire's remains showed signs of blunt trauma, consistent with a struggle. Ethan's, however, had a fractured skull. But the pattern didn't match Claire's injuries. He'd been struck from behind, by someone taller. Toxicology from residual bone tissue revealed something else. Chloroform traces, in both victims. Someone had incapacitated them both. Mercer reviewed every timeline again. Claire disappeared, October 12th, 2017. Rowe's truck found, months later, near Mount Jefferson. Holden quit his job, 2 weeks after the disappearance. Holden's suicide, 2024, after claiming the water, hid more than one story. And now here it was, both stories lying in the same lake. Mercer met with the forensic psychologist assigned to the case, Dr. Lillian Hart. She leaned back in her chair, scanning the reports. If we're assuming Holden was the one who disposed of them, there's a question of control. He wasn't acting out of impulse. This was deliberate containment. He wanted them together. Why together? Mercer asked. Dr. Hart tapped her pen. Because whoever killed them wanted the narrative to end there. He didn't just kill them, he buried the story in one box. 3 days later, the FBI's digital forensics team cracked the USB drive recovered years earlier, the one found among Roe's belongings in the workshop. Previously, 6 of its 7 video files were blank. Now, using new recovery software, they managed to pull partial data from 2 of those corrupted files. The recovered footage showed an abandoned maintenance hallway. The date, October 11th, 2017. The camera shook slightly, as if someone were holding it low, recording secretly. Claire's voice was faint, arguing with someone out of frame. Claire, I told you to stop following me, Ethan. Ethan, off screen. You don't understand. He told me to bring you. Claire, who? Who told you? Pause, Ethan. The guard. The video cut off. That moment shattered everything Mercer thought he knew. Ethan wasn't working alone. He was being manipulated. Holden hadn't just helped cover it up. He'd orchestrated the entire thing. The pieces fit too perfectly now. Holden had been obsessed with control, quietly operating in the shadows. He'd used Roe's mental instability and access at the hospital to set Claire up, pulling strings until both were disposable. When things got messy, Holden silenced them both, and then buried them in the lake, his final story. But there was still one last question. Why now? Why lead investigators to the lake after all these years, only to end his own life right before the truth surfaced? Mercer suspected guilt, or maybe fear. The FBI found no financial motive, no personal link to Claire beyond passing proximity. But when they searched Holden's computer, they uncovered a series of unsent emails, written between 2017 and 2024, all addressed to the same person. Dr. Paul Lennox, Chief of Security, Cascadia Regional Hospital. The emails were desperate, rambling. You told me she wouldn't get hurt. You said it would just scare her. Now I can't sleep. I still hear her in the water. Lennox had retired in 2019, moved to Arizona, and never once appeared in the investigation. Until now, Mercer forwarded the files to federal authorities. Within days, an arrest warrant was issued. When agents reached Lennox's desert home, they found him sitting on the porch, quiet, almost expecting them. He didn't resist. When asked why he did it, he said one sentence that would haunt Mercer for years. I didn't kill her. I just wanted to keep her quiet. Under interrogation, Lennox confessed that he'd learned Claire was planning to whistleblow on the hospital for unsafe patient handling and falsified records, something that could have cost him millions in bonuses, so he'd ordered Holden to handle it, to intimidate her, to make her stop. Holden recruited Roe, the shy maintenance worker infatuated with her, to lure her out under false pretenses. But things spiraled. Claire fought back. Roe panicked. Holden intervened, killing them both. Then he hid the evidence under the lake, a place he fished at every summer, a place he thought would never give them back. Claire Donovan's body was finally laid to rest on July 3, 2024, with her family, colleagues, and the small-town community that had never stopped looking for her. Ethan Roe was buried beside her, not as her killer, but as another victim of manipulation. And Detective Ryan Mercer, standing by the graves, realized the cruel truth of every cold case. Sometimes justice doesn't end in punishment, it ends in understanding. When the FBI transported Dr. Paul Lennox back to Seattle, the case that had started as a simple missing person investigation was now sprawling into something far bigger. A web of corruption, power, and silence that reached deep into the very institution Claire Donovan had once trusted. Detective Ryan Mercer stood behind the glass of the interrogation room as Lennox sat across from Special Agent Elena Vargas, hands folded, calm as a priest at confession. His face, tanned and deeply lined from Arizona sun, gave away nothing. The fluorescent light above him flickered, humming like a second heartbeat. You said you didn't kill her, Vargas began, but you ordered someone else to. That makes you just as responsible. Lennox exhaled slowly, his voice low, almost clinical. You're wrong, Agent. I didn't order a murder. I ordered a correction. A correction? Vargas raised an eyebrow. Claire Donovan was going to ruin everything, he said. Not just for me, for the entire system. You think hospitals run on goodwill? We were barely staying solvent. You start exposing internal malpractices during a pandemic. People die. So I did what was necessary to keep the doors open. Mercer leaned toward the glass, anger tightening his jaw. It wasn't remorse, it was justification. As the interrogation continued, Vargas slid a stack of photographs across the table, evidence recovered from Lennox's laptop, images of falsified medical forms, altered patient records, and financial documents showing hundreds of thousands of dollars in consulting fees funneled to shell companies. Lennox didn't flinch. He just smiled faintly. Those are just numbers, Agent Vargas. They don't prove intent. But what came next did. The FBI's cyber forensics team had uncovered a folder on his encrypted hard drive, titled Staff Training. Archive. Inside were dozens of video clips recorded on internal hospital surveillance cameras, many dated around October 2017. Most were mundane. Training footage, employee reviews, disciplinary meetings. But one file, time-stamped October 10th, 2017, 2 days before Claire vanished, was labeled confession.mp4. When Mercer and Vargas played it in the evidence room, the audio hissed with static before stabilizing. The footage showed Claire Donovan, sitting in what appeared to be an empty supply office. She looked nervous but composed, speaking directly to the camera. "If anything happens to me, it's because I tried to tell the truth," she began. "I've seen falsified records, patients transferred between departments with no chart history, deaths written off as medication errors that don't exist in the system." She paused, swallowing hard. "I told Dr. Lennox I was going to report it. He told me I should reconsider, that I was too idealistic for this field. I think he meant it as a threat." The screen flickered, and then another figure appeared in the background. Victor Holden, the security supervisor, stepping into the frame. He placed a hand on Claire's shoulder, his smile tight, unnatural. "Everything's fine, Claire," he said softly. "You don't need to record this. Let's talk privately, okay?" The video cut out abruptly. Mercer's stomach twisted. This wasn't just evidence, it was a prophecy. Claire knew. Vargas looked at him. "We've got motive, manipulation, and conspiracy to conceal a death. But if Lennox buried this video, he knew it would surface someday. Why keep it?" Mercer thought for a long moment. "Because he's proud of it. People like him don't see it as a crime. They see it as control." That night, Mercer sat in his car outside the precinct, watching the rain hit the windshield in rhythmic pulses. His phone buzzed. A text from forensics. Recovered second file. Different angle, same room. The new footage played like a hidden camera, placed behind a stack of supply boxes. Claire stood, arguing with someone off-screen. The voice wasn't Lennox's this time. It was Ethan Rowe. "They said I could help you," Ethan said, his tone desperate. "You shouldn't be here," Claire replied. "They're using you. You don't even know why. I just wanted to protect you." Then Holden's voice, cold, commanding, entered. "Both of you need to calm down. You're making this worse." The screen shook, a scuffle, then static. That was the last known image of Claire alive. The recovered footage solidified what investigators had theorized. Lennox had orchestrated the cover-up. Holden had executed it, and Ethan, the unstable maintenance worker, had been nothing more than a pawn, manipulated until he became expendable. But there was one more layer of deceit to uncover. During the digital reconstruction of Holden's old security drives, technicians discovered encrypted voice recordings, 26 files spanning nearly a decade, labeled night reports. They appeared to be nightly logs of maintenance and staff activity, but when decrypted, they revealed far more. On October 13th, 2017, one day after Claire's disappearance, Holden's voice could be heard, breathing heavily into the recorder. She fought harder than expected. Rowe panicked. "I didn't want to do it this way. Paul said it had to look clean. But the water will keep it quiet." There was silence. Then a faint metallic sound. tape being sealed. If they ever find this, they'll know it wasn't my idea. He made me finish it. When Vargas confronted Lennox with the recording, his composure finally cracked. His fingers twitched, his jaw set. "You can't prove that's me giving orders," he snapped. "We don't have to," Vargas said. "You just did." Within weeks, Dr. Paul Lennox was charged with conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and 2 counts of second-degree murder. The media dubbed it the Clearwater Conspiracy. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, broadcasting every update. Social media exploded with outrage, not just over Claire's murder, but over how long her truth had been buried beneath bureaucracy and silence. But for Detective Mercer, the trial didn't bring relief. He'd spent 7 years chasing the shadow of a woman who had tried to do the right thing and paid for it with her life. Now he had the truth, and it felt like ashes. A week after Lennox's sentencing, Mercer visited Clearwater Lake one last time. The sun had returned. The water, refilled, calm, shimmered like nothing had ever happened. He tossed a small bouquet into the waves, watching it drift. "You were right, Claire," he murmured. "Truth doesn't drown. It just takes time to surface." The ripples spread across the water, catching the light, each one carrying a story that would never be forgotten again. 6 months after the Clearwater conspiracy trial, Detective Ryan Mercer thought the case was finally over. The files were sealed, the evidence logged, and the lake, once drained and haunted by secrets, had been declared safe again. But peace didn't come easy. Every night, he still dreamt of Claire Donovan's face flickering on that old video screen, whispering, "If anything happens to me, it was supposed to be over," until another woman disappeared. Her name was Dr. Emily Rowe, a trauma surgeon, 32, and the younger sister of Ethan Rowe, the man manipulated by Lennox years ago. She had requested to meet Mercer privately, claiming she had found something the FBI missed. But the meeting never happened. She was last seen leaving the hospital parking garage at 10:43 p.m. Her car was found 2 days later, doors unlocked, keys in the ignition, a faint smell of bleach inside. A folded note sat on the passenger seat. It read, "You can't bury water. It always finds a way back." Mercer's gut twisted. That phrase, it was the same one Halden used in his final recording. Before his death in custody, he reopened the case. Forensics confirmed the paper. Stock was from Clearwater Medical's archived supply room, the same one where Claire's final video had been filmed. But the room had been sealed since the investigation. Someone with clearance had reopened it. Mercer drove there himself, the building now half abandoned and ghostly quiet. His flashlight swept through empty hallways where machines stood like forgotten monuments. The smell of disinfectant clung to everything. He reached the old record storage room. The seal on the door was broken. Inside, dust motes floated in the beam of his light. The shelves were half empty, as if someone had been searching for something recently. Then he saw it. A faint shimmer under the far table. A recorder. It was the same model Halden had used for his night. Logs. Mercer pressed play. Static. Then a voice. "This is Emily Rowe. If anyone finds this, I was right." Lennox wasn't acting alone. The funding trail doesn't end with him. It starts higher. Board level. A pause. Shuffling papers. Her breathing quickened. "There's someone still here, watching me. The tape cut out. Back at headquarters, Mercer cross-referenced the hospital board's historical records. One name appeared repeatedly across the financial transfers that funded Lennox's department. Margaret Vale, chief administrator from 2014 to 2019. She had resigned quietly after the scandal broke, citing stress and medical reasons. When Mercer checked her new address, it led him to a private estate 3 hours north of Seattle, nestled against a riverbank. The water connection wasn't lost on him. He arrived at dusk. The property was vast, surrounded by pine forest and mist. Through the window he could see Margaret Vale sitting by a fireplace, reading. Calm. alone. When she opened the door, her eyes widened slightly, not with surprise, but with recognition. "Detective Mercer," she said softly. "I was wondering when you'd come." "You know why I'm here?" "Emily Rowe," she said, voice steady. "You think I had something to do with that?" "I think you had something to do with all of it." Vale sighed, turning toward the river outside. "Do you know why Clearwater was built where it was, Detective? The land was unstable. The groundwater was tainted from the old paper mill. But the board approved it anyway because it was cheap." She looked back at him. "That's where it started. Every patient who died from infection, every falsified report, every cover-up, all to protect a hospital that was never meant to exist. Claire Donovan found out. Lennox took care of it. But it was me who signed the order to keep the truth buried." "So you admit it?" Mercer's voice hardened. "Admit?" She smiled faintly. "Detective, I live with it. Every day." Then she handed him a small envelope. Inside was a USB drive labeled "The Foundation Files." "Everything you need is on there. Financial trails, board communications, internal audits. It proves the hospital was a fraud from the beginning." Mercer studied her. "Why now?" She turned back to the window. "Because Emily Rowe came here too, 2 nights before she vanished. She said she wanted the truth. I told her to leave. She didn't." "What happened to her?" Vale's eyes glistened, reflecting the dim firelight. "You'll find her where it began." At dawn, Mercer followed the river downstream, toward the old Clearwater Inlet, now fenced off and forgotten. The water shimmered like black glass. He waded in slowly, scanning the current. Then, beneath a cluster of reeds, he saw the edge of a white coat tangled in branches. He called for backup, but he already knew. Dr. Emily Rowe was gone, her body preserved in the cold current, her face serene, as if she had found the truth she sought. In her coat pocket was a small waterproof bag. Inside, a second USB drive. When investigators decrypted it, the files matched those Vale had given him, except one new addition, a document titled Patient Zero. It contained records from 2015, an experimental drug trial run off the books. Patients had died. Reports had been erased. Funding came from a private foundation under a single name, Margaret Vale. When police returned to arrest her, Vale was gone. Her estate was empty, her car still in the driveway. Only the front door was left ajar, and near the riverbank, footprints disappeared into the water. Search teams combed the current for 3 days. They never found her. Months later, the investigation was closed. Clearwater Hospital was permanently demolished. A memorial was built near the lake for Claire Donovan, Ethan Rowe, and all others who vanished in its shadow. Detective Mercer stood there during the dedication, the autumn wind brushing across the water. He tossed a single lily into the lake. A ripple spread outward, slow, widening, until it reached the far shore. And for just a moment, he thought he heard it again, that faint whisper of water against stone. "Truth doesn't drown,"